You're listening to the Keep Optimizing podcast to increase your traffic, improve your conversion rates, and grow your profits.
Hello and welcome. If you're looking to improve the performance and return on investment of your marketing, then you have come to the right place. I'm Chloe Thomas, the host of this Marketing Focus podcast, and it's very, very cool to have you tuning in. Now, because this show is brand new, I'm running a competition where you could win a Keep Optimizing podcast t-shirt. So stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out how to enter. In today's episode, I'm talking to Geoff Atkinson about dynamic rendering, because this month we're all about SEO. Now, whilst dynamic rendering is a pretty enterprise-level SEO tactic, it's something new that you really should be aware of. Plus, we get into some other SEO areas too, including page speed, structured data, and more. We're just about to meet Geoff, but before we do, please do check out the sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Klaviyo, the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for email and SMS messaging. Whether you're launching your e-commerce business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo gives you the tools to get growing faster. That's why it's trusted by over 38,000 e-commerce brands. Build your contact lists, send emails that pop, and create marketing moments that build valuable customer relationships over any distance. Get started for free today. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Today, I'm chatting with SEO expert Geoff Atkinson. Geoff is an ex-retailer and the founder and CEO of Huckabuy. Hello, Geoff.
Hello, Chloe. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Now, how did you get involved in SEO? How did you make the move from being a retailer to being all about SEO?
Well, I just found that the industry was lacking. From my experience at Overstock, SEO was a huge growth channel and the crux of sort of our new customer acquisition and all sorts of amazing things. And the industry of SEO, at least here in the States, it's an $85 billion industry with a net promoter score of 0. So it's just really struggling. You'd rather go to your dentist than see your SEO agency. So it's a lot of agencies, it's a lot of consultants, but it's really a technical problem. And so the industry is just not addressing it correctly. And anytime you have an industry with a net promoter score of 0, it's ready for disruption. So we're coming at this from a technical angle. And I actually didn't expect to be full-time in SEO and owning an SEO company, but here we are, and it's going quite well. So.
Yeah, we tend to get very obsessed with keywords and link building, and then we miss out on that other part of SEO, which is the bit which you're focused on, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And I get exactly what you mean. It's exactly the same in the UK. I have regular chats with retailers about how do I justify my SEO budget.
Yeah, people are just frustrated. That there's a disconnect between what it takes to actually drive SEO success and what an agency actually can provide. So they can do stuff like write content and link build and things like that. But when it comes to the big technical boxes that are sort of necessary for growth, they just can't address those. And a lot of times an SEO team, even internally, can't address those because they're big technical issues. And that creates this sort of competing, goals where one is trying to grow and the other one's trying to have more and more billable hours. So they're just not aligned. And when that happens, you're not going to have happy customers.
So there's various things you're doing at Huckabuy to try and solve these problems. But one of the big ones, and it's the one I want to talk to you about today, because I'll be honest, guys listening, I know next to nothing about this thing we're going to be talking about today. So hopefully I'm going to ask all the questions you guys want to know. But it's something you call dynamic rendering, which, as I understand it at the moment, is that we've got used to optimizing our desktop site. We've got used to optimizing our mobile site. But for SEO success, we should be worrying about a third site, which is our dynamic rendering site. Have I understood at all there?
You have. You're along the right lines. It's actually not a completely different site. If you think about the desktop and the mobile and the dynamic rendering version, they all contain the same content. They're just sort of presented in different ways. But yes, you can actually give Google now a separate version. And for me, this is the biggest change they've made arguably in the last 5 to 10 years. We've always heard that you have to optimize for the user, and whatever the user experience is what Google wants to experience. And now they've thrown that out the window.
Because it used to be like a hugely black hat tactic to hide things on your website for Google's benefit and it not to be part of the user experience. Was like, oh, you can't do that. Google will notice and they'll kick you off the search engine. So it's completely 360'd now.
It is. I mean, a lot of it still, you can't trick them. So you can't, for example, stuff a bunch of keywords in the footer of your dynamic rendered version. All the content and the products and all that has to be the same. But this came about really because of JavaScript. So JavaScript is like Google's nemesis. Almost every web page on the internet now has JavaScript on it. And as soon as Google runs into JavaScript, they can't crawl it with their normal HTML bots. They have to put it into what they call a rendering queue that can take 2 to 4 weeks. It takes like 10 times the processing time from them to crawl a page with JavaScript on it. So if you think about how much that just costs them, if all of a sudden their cost to understand a page goes 10x, it became a really difficult problem for them. And so they essentially came out and said, well, let's introduce dynamic rendering. Let's allow sites to give us a version that's just simpler. It's a lot kind of like AMP. You just have a sort of dumbed down version. Get rid of the JavaScript, make it flat HTML. You can make it faster. You can get rid of stuff like chat boxes and things like that they're not interested in, and just give them a simpler version. And so that's what we've really. It's only been a year, and I'm amazed how many really smart SEO people actually, they've probably heard of it, but not a lot of companies are doing it yet because it is a big technical challenge. But it is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and it strikes me, you said about the cost to Google in terms of processing time, but also the cost to Google in terms of looking after their own customers, the searchers. Because if it takes 2 to 4 weeks to get a site through the rendering in order for them to be able to read it, that they're not giving the latest results back to people because they don't know they exist because they're not in the index. So hugely costly to Google. So it makes complete sense why they've taken this step. So how difficult is it to create a dynamically rendered site? Because you mentioned AMP there, and that's obviously a very simple site format. And we've now got plugins we can download and chuck into websites that just almost do it automatically. Is it that simple with dynamic rendering, or is it a complicated process?
It's a pretty complicated process. So
damn
it. It's a pretty complicated technical process. You essentially have to convert content that's being generated by JavaScript into flat HTML versions. And then you have to store it somewhere. And ideally it's fast and it's easy for them to crawl. Ideally it contains structured data. I haven't seen many, literally just a handful of companies I've seen do it internally. There are a few products, Huckabuy being one of them, and a few others that can actually do this for you in a relatively painless way.
And the complexity comes because our sites are so just full of JavaScript these days. So it's not just a same solution for every website. There's a lot of customization that goes along the way.
Yeah, so if you think about say your reviews are powered by JavaScript, say you use Bazaar Voice, how are you going to get all those reviews and now transport them and build another version of the site that has all the other functionality and features? It just doesn't really get done, especially if you look at any CMO's sort of prioritization of dev tasks. When are you going to actually take 6 months to build a version of the site just for Google? It just doesn't get prioritized very often, nor is it even on people's radar yet. So we don't see it happen internally very often at all. It's a much easier thing to do if you do, use a technology provider.
Yeah, I think it would end up at the bottom of or kind of just below the tasks that get agreed to be built by the dev team. And every month you go back in and reassess, can we do? No, we've got a payment provider to put in, or we've got a new product page to build, or we've got a new integration with something. And it's like, oh, can we do it this month? No. So yeah, anything which can speed that up. And presumably there's quite a lot of, this isn't a piece of expertise that people need in-house, because once it's built, it's built.
It's ongoing. You basically, the way that we do it is we actually render a version. So if you think about when Google does that rendering process with JavaScript, they're actually doing exactly what we're doing, which is, but we're willing, they only spend 10 seconds 3 to 10 seconds on a page. We'll spend a minute if we have to. So we're actually kind of, if you think about it, we're actually doing Google's work for them and then queuing up this version.
Could you not say that the whole of SEO is about doing Google's work for them? Because we're trying to give them the best possible information to enable them to give the best results. So I suppose it's in some ways, it's the natural next step in SEO.
I think so. I mean, I think that's what SEO is doing Google's job for them. Others may disagree, but yeah, I do think it's a big next step in SEO, in my opinion. I mean, it's, just hearing it for the first time, I was like, what is this? This is not real. And then you go on their site and you read about it, and sure enough, they're pushing this. They want this. It makes their life much, much easier.
Well, yeah, I would be pushing it if I was Google too. But I have to say, I think they're doing a bad job about it. If, chatting to you is pretty much the first I've heard of it. And I'd be willing to bet that the majority of the listeners are going, really? Why has no one told me about that? So if we're building this separate dynamically rendered site for Google, how much can we expect it to impact on our performance in the search engines?
Depends on how difficult it is for Google to crawl your site today. So some sites are actually relatively light on JavaScript, and so this isn't a big problem for them. For other sites, we've seen sites, big enterprise sites, they'll have 100 different JavaScript tags on one page, making it almost like impossible. So for sites, and the other piece about this is a lot of companies don't know that this is an issue for them. They just add the chat box and they don't think about why that might cause problems. So they might actually have big problems where it's taking they're huge content strategies that are taking 2 to 4 weeks to get indexed, or they're just not getting indexed at all. So it depends on the tech stack and how bad the situation is. For sites that it's a bad situation, they can grow through the roof. It's triple digit sort of really, really quickly. But most sites, like our average customer on this product, grows 62% in 12 months. So that'll kind of give you an average on how people perform. It's really high. I mean, those are pretty big numbers.
That's not bad going, 62% growth over 12 months on the SEO front. I think anyone would be up for that. And it occurs to me when you're saying about that, the sites which don't have much JavaScript probably don't have much JavaScript because the SEO guy keeps winning the argument against the UX guys in the marketing teams.
That's exactly
so in many
right.
ways, yeah, this is the point at which everyone gets to be happy.
Or you work at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is like the perfect SEO site. We couldn't really help them.
Yeah, but it strikes me that a dynamically rendered site is the solution to the bashing of heads between the UX team and the SEO team. Because it's like, finally, it's almost like the UX guy who should be bringing this to going SEO and going, please, can we do this? Because then I can get on with making the site work and you can get on with the SEO and we don't have to keep arguing.
Yeah.
Because, that happens a lot in businesses.
You're absolutely right. In fact, we kind of pitch it like that. Now you can do whatever you want on the front end, and you'll still have this great version for Google to crawl. Don't have to think about that anymore.
It seems a bit of a no-brainer. Is there? Do we have to have a separate dynamically rendered site for desktop and for mobile? Because Google will judge us on our mobile site and judge us on our desktop site. Does this throw that out the window?
We actually do 2 versions, but you can just do mobile. You can't just do desktop, but you can just do mobile. They'll get as much information as they need. They're really just, when you do this, they basically can now come crawl and basically just download your entire site really, really quickly. And that's the goal of it, is to just queue up for them the HTML, let them just download it. And just doing the mobile version, we believe still works. We just provide both so that we get, good scores and page speed scores and things like that.
And presumably once you've done the work for one of them, it's not a huge amount more when you've done the work for the mobile, it's not a huge amount more to expand it up to the desktop.
That's
presumably.
Right.
Yeah. So why not bother with with doing both if it's going to give you that extra little edge? And Geoff, is there a question I should have asked you about dynamic rendering that I haven't?
Well, one interesting thing about, I get asked, so page speed is a very big factor. And we're actually working on a product for page speed because it's another very difficult technical problem to solve. There's no sort of one solution yet that just gives you great page speed. So we get asked, with the dynamic rendering version, our product's called SEO Cloud. Does that, and it's super fast. So it's cached at edge using Cloudflare. It takes page speed from like 5 seconds down to like 300 milliseconds. So it's really, really fast. And so people want to know, well, does that actually impact my score for my Google page speed score, my Lighthouse score? And we think actually the answer is no. The way that they actually track it is because everybody has Chrome browsers, is the way that they actually track how fast your site is. So you do have to make page speed improvements. This is why we're building another product that actually will enhance the user page speed. But that's really the factor, which is interesting, right? So if you don't uncheck that box when you first download Chrome to not send data to Google, you're sending, every time you use a site, they're actually within the browser sending information back to Google on how fast your site is. And that's how Lighthouse works. And that's how page speed impacts the algorithm, is actually through those actual users interacting with websites and then information being sent back to Google across the world. So that's actually it's a big algorithm factor, and people always are like, well, does this just solve that problem? No, it doesn't right now, but we are building a version that will solve that problem. That it's kind of an interesting thing on how do they actually take page speed into account, and that's how they do it.
I was when you first started saying about that, I was like, gosh, really? And then as you were explaining, I was like, well, actually, given it's a metric that they've added in about user experience, it would be completely insane for them to take the speed of your dynamically rendered site, given a customer, a user, should never, ever see the dynamically rendered site. So it would completely flaw their algorithm. Then I was kind of thinking, well, maybe they send like a bot. But yeah, tracking actual users' experience would make a huge amount more sense given the data that they've got, but is also slightly, wow, at the same time.
Their biggest new algorithm change, so they're making a huge algorithm change right now. It's called the Page Experience Algorithm Update. It's not a huge impact so far, but they're basically saying in 2021, this is going to be, it'll be all about what the page experience is like with the user. Where are they clicking? How fast is the page load? How much are they interacting? How much are they reading? All those user statistics that they now have because of everybody's using Chrome are going to be they already are a major factor if you think about the page speed and all those things, but it's going to become an even bigger factor in 2021. Neil Patel actually just put out a big post yesterday about the Google Page Experience Algorithm Update, and it's a big one. And yeah, that's how they're tracking it. I know it's sort of a mind-bending thing, but behind the scenes, Google's quite smart. There's a reason why they give away Chrome for free to everybody.
Oh yeah, they're certainly not stupid over there, are they? Those of you who are listening, we will put a link to that Neil Patel blog in the show notes for you, so you can grab a link and go and binge on that, possibly whilst you listen to the rest of this episode if you want to. Although reading one blog whilst listening to a podcast probably doesn't work, so maybe hold off till you finish listening to us. So the question I was going to ask you next was that it's interesting with that algorithm update that they've called it the page experience, not the website experience, which I think is a big marker as well about the fact that we need to be thinking about how each of our pages performs, which I think with bounce rate analysis, people are starting to. But it strikes me, therefore, we're going to be thinking a lot more about individual pages on our site rather than the overall site performance, which I think can only be a good thing.
Yeah, there's this, I know I'm kind of getting into some macro trends here. I hope you don't mind, but there's this trend that has happened over the last couple of years, and it's a trend towards immediacy. So immediacy matters more now than brand loyalty to a user, which is crazy. 50% of searches are now zero click, meaning you just get the answer. You don't care, in the old days when you'd search, say, for a sports score, and you trust Yahoo Sports over ESPN, so you'd click through Yahoo Sports. Now you just get the answer, and you don't even really know where it's coming from. So there's that's sort of, in my mind, the difference between overall website scores and page scores. Pages give answers. Pages give immediacy. So that's why it's all about the page. It's all about structured data so that you can give them that enhancement and be able to have them just give the answer. That's kind of where it's going. It's actually already gotten there, which is crazy. But yeah, 50% of searches are now zero click, and it's just trending that way, especially with more and more voice search coming. That's just happening.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that wider macro world of SEO in a moment. But before we do, there's one term you mentioned earlier, which I know some of our listeners will be going, what on earth is that? You mentioned structured data needing to be a part of the dynamically rendered site. And I know a lot more about structured data than I do about dynamic rendering because it's been around for quite a lot longer. But I know a lot of businesses still have no idea what it is. And it is one of those cool things that you really can just put it in place once and it works. So could you just give us the quick 101 on structured data, please, Geoff?
Sure. So structured data is a language that was invented over 10 years ago now, and it's an authoritative language that allows a website to directly and authoritatively talk to a search engine. So instead of there's structured data for almost anything that's visible on a page. You can have structured data about a product is the most used structured data on the internet. And instead of them having to come and crawl the HTML and try to figure out what it is, you can say, this is the product, here's the name, the price, the description, the UPC. And so they just authoritatively get it. You can do it with a sports score or a recipe. So it does sort of two things. One is it helps them understand. So the more structured data you have, the more they're going to understand about the site, the more keywords you're going to rank for, the more traffic you're going to get. It just has performance benefits. And then they use it as well. So now instead of when you search, used to search, you come back with 10 blue links. Now you come back with the sports score or a recipe just showing up or product reviews. All of those are powered by, they're called rich enhancements, and rich enhancements are powered by structured data. So when you see a search results page now that's much more enhanced than it used to be, that's all being powered by this language. So a huge factor in their algorithm now. It's really a best practice, no matter what, is to have really good structured data. Most e-commerce platforms are going to have some sort of structured data already in there, but it's a good thing to check. And this was our first launching point for Huckabuy, was the importance of structured data. So we built an automated solution. But it's very important, and it just continues to be so. It's sort of like a macro trend like mobile. It's just getting more and more important as time goes on.
Nicely explained. Thank you, Geoff. Right. We are going to pause for a reminder of our sponsors, and then we'll be getting into the wider world of SEO. It's safe to say that most of us have been doing more shopping online lately. And if you're an e-commerce brand, that means you might be seeing more first-time customers. But once they've made that first purchase, how do you keep them coming back? Well, that's what Klaviyo is for. Klaviyo is the ultimate email and SMS marketing platform for e-commerce brands. It gives you the tools to build your contact list, send memorable emails, automate key messages, and more. Way, way more. Whether you're launching a new business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo can help you get growing faster. And it's free to get started. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Okay, Geoff, so far we've gone deep into dynamic rendering and a couple of other topics along the way. And now you get to wow us with your insider knowledge about the whole of SEO. So for the following questions, your answer can be anything to do with SEO, which of course does include dynamic rendering and everything we've spoken about so far. So Geoff, you ready for these?
I'm ready.
Cool. Okay, let's start with SEO newbie advice. If we've inspired someone to take their first step with SEO, what do they need to know to give themselves the best chance of success?
First step is, I'll give you two steps. First step is keyword research. Go into Google Keyword Planner or Moz and start entering in keywords and try to figure out what your customer is searching for. And then the second step is to have your navigation, the top navigation, align with those keywords. So make the site descriptive based on what people search for instead of what you want to call things internally. Just that step of figuring out what people search for when it comes to your product and services, and then making your navigation reflect that demand, you will be off and running. That's a big, big first couple steps.
I love it. And I have a feeling there's a few people who are going, who've done a lot of SEO, who are going, not convinced our navbar replicates that as a to-do do for me. But for the rest of those who've started, of course, they've got to keep optimizing. So what's your favorite way to improve SEO performance?
For me, it's the technical stuff, because that scales across the whole site. if you improve your page speed or you improve your structured data, it just scales across every single page. So I think the most sort of scalable, and this is the same thing at Overstock, was the technical stuff. We know we have to write content. We know we have to optimize for the user. But if you think about optimizing for Google, who's arguably your most important visitor in any given day, let's give them the sort of user experience they want, and you'll get really good results from that. So invest in technology. That's, I'm a marketer that loves to invest in technology. It's always the highest ROI in my career.
Excellent. Now, it's impossible to improve our marketing unless we're monitoring the performance, but the list of stuff we could monitor is always overwhelming. So what for you is the number one SEO KPI?
Revenue. No questions asked. There's only one thing that really matters, unless you're even publishing sites care about revenue. But if you're software, how many leads I'm always amazed that we talk to so many customers and potential customers. How many websites don't know the revenue per visitor for their SEO channel? It's pretty easy in e-commerce, but some of these other segments. So revenue is the metric that pays the bills, keeps the lights on, makes you grow or shrink. So that's the metric that I care about.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. Too many people get hung up on other bits in SEO, but if the money's not there, especially in e-commerce, what is the point?
Yep.
Okay, Geoff, the last question. Crystal ball time. What is coming up in the next 6 to 12 months that we should be getting ready for in SEO?
Voice search. So voice search, I think, is a lot like mobile used to be. I'm going to sort of date myself here, but there was a time when we had Trios and Palm Pilots and mobile just didn't really work. It was like, that's how I think about voice right now. It kind of works, but the user experience isn't better than getting on your desktop or your mobile phone. So there was a time when mobile was just, you'd hunt and peck with the stylus and it'd take, 2 minutes to load a web page. And then the iPhone came out, and then the speeds started to pick up, and then websites started getting optimized for mobile. And now you can do almost anything you want. So it flipped from like 90% desktop, 10% mobile in like a 1 year period. That just went the opposite way, 90% mobile, 10% desktop. I think the same thing's going to happen to voice search. So voice search, the experience just isn't quite there yet. If I want to buy a product using voice search and I'm not using Amazon, it's kind of challenging to make sure that you're getting the best price and the best reviews and all that. Now, Amazon, that's a different story. But voice search is getting really important. And it's interesting as well in that there's actually 3 players that are major players. It's not just Google. So you have Google, you have Apple with Siri, and then you have Alexa. And Alexa has Amazon behind it with its entire e-commerce site. So it's actually a bit of a level playing field for them. And it's going to be really interesting to see who wins it. I'd say actually Alexa's winning the game right now. Amazon's winning the game. But voice search is going to get to the point, especially if, I don't know if you're around young people, they're way more comfortable with it than I am. Like my nephew uses voice search all the time, and I'm super impressed by it. So as those kids get older, it's just going to be a really important factor. So thinking about optimizing for voice search is critical. And it is powered by structured data in most cases. Alexa is a little bit different, but you definitely have to be thinking about how do I improve my presence when people start to search by voice search.
That's awesome. Thank you, Geoff. We are nearly at the end of the show. So could you please let the listeners know where they can find you and your business on the web and social media, please?
Sure. The best way is just huckabuy.com. It's HUCKABUY, like buy a product. If you fill out a contact us form, we'd love to give your listeners 20% off anything at Huckabuy. So that's the best way. And then LinkedIn is the easiest way. LinkedIn and Twitter are the easiest way to get in touch with me personally. And it's just Geoff with a G, Geoff.
Simple as that. I thought you were going to claim to be just Geoff on the web there. I was like, wow, that's impressive. Geoff Atkinson with a G and 2 Fs. So, Geoff, thank you so much for being on the Keep Optimizing podcast and for being so generous sharing your SEO expertise with us. I think all our to-do lists have grown immeasurably whilst listening to you, which is the point to some extent. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chloe. That was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, some complex, cutting-edge SEO for you there. You can get links to everything we discussed, the full transcript of the episode, important notes and more at keepoptimizing.com. Remember, that's with an S, not a Z. And as part of my mission to help you improve your marketing, I've invited all our SEO specialists to join us for a Q&A webinar at the end of the month. That's your chance to get your questions answered. So get yourself registered for the webinar by going to keepoptimizing.com, where you will find out all the details. And if you're listening after the webinar happened, then don't worry, you can still catch the replay. Just head to keepoptimizing.com. So thank you very much for tuning into this episode of the Keep Optimizing podcast. If you've enjoyed the episode, then make sure you check out episode number 6 with Luke Carthy, where we go into the wider world of technical SEO. And finally, I would love your help to spread the word about the Keep Optimizing podcast, which is why we are running our launch competition. So how do you win one of our Keep Optimizing podcast t-shirts? Well, we're going to be giving away a t-shirt every week in August to someone who's posted what they think of the show on social media. You get one entry by sharing on Twitter or Instagram what you think and including the hashtag Keep Optimizing. Or you can get 3 whole entries by finding us on Apple Podcasts, then subscribing, rating and reviewing. Screen grab your review and share it on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag Keep Optimizing. Do all that and you'll get 3 entries. Now we're gathering all the entries up and we'll be picking one winner every Wednesday until the 2nd of September. So you can find all the details about that at keepoptimizing.com. Have a great week, all of you, and make sure you listen to the next episode so I can help you to keep optimizing your marketing.
Access everything Keep Optimizing at keepoptimizing.com. That's with an S, not a Z.